pH requirements for any bacteria. So while we are discussing about all these things, I want you to also write down or note down few points in your notebooks. So whenever you are listening to any recorded lecture, just be ready with your pen and notebook and keep on writing the important points which I'm going to dictate you while discussing. So just put today's date and give the heading of environmental factors slash physical factors affecting bacterial growth. I will repeat, give the heading of environmental factors slash physical factors affecting bacterial growth. Once you are done writing that, under that, give number 1 and write down pH. Underline pH. And under that, write down these 3 terms. Acidophile, put a dash. Write down the pH range 0.1 to 5.4. Just write down these 3 terms and their respective pH ranges. I will repeat again. You have written down the heading of environmental factors or physical factors affecting growth. Under that, number 1 is pH. Under that, mention the names of these 3 categories, and in front of each category, write down the pH range. First category is acidophile. Range is 0.1 to 5.4. Second category is neutrophile, 5.4 to 8. And third category is alkalifile, 7 to 11.5. That's it. Once you are done writing this, let's go back to our discussion. Next factor is temperature. Okay, so very important factor is the temperature. So just like pH, bacterial species have their specific ranges of growth for temperature. So there are ranges of temperature in which given bacterial species can grow their best. Okay, so most species of bacteria can grow over 30 degrees Celsius temperature range, but the minimum and maximum temperature for different species vary considerably. Now, just like pH ranges, for the temperature, there are categories. So based on the temperature requirements, bacteria are categorized as psychrophiles, mesophiles, or thermophiles. Let's have a look at these terms one by one. What are psychrophiles, mesophiles, and thermophiles? Before that, there are 2 other important terms of which for which you need to know the meaning of these terms. So within these groups, the bacteria are further classified as obligate or facultative. So whenever, anywhere, any term is attached to obligate, that means that the organism must have the specified environmental condition. Obligate is equivalent to must have. Okay, and whenever there is any term attached to facultative, means organism is able to adjust to and tolerate the environmental condition, but it can also live in other conditions. Now we will understand the meanings of these terms in more depth in consecutive slides. For now, just remember or try to understand the difference between these 2 terms. Obligate means must have. Facultative means can or cannot have, or in presence of it, it can survive, but in absence of it, it can also survive. It is not a must have. Okay. So let's understand the term of first category, or psychrophiles. What are psychrophiles? Psychrophiles are cold loving organisms, or psychrophiles grow best at temperatures of 15 to 20 degrees Celsius. So these are the organisms which grow best at very low temperature. Few psychrophiles have also been found to grow well at 0 degrees Celsius. So there are organisms which are surviving and growing in polar regions below the below the icy surface in the sea. So those organisms are known as psychrophiles. So they are further divided into obligate psychrophile. If you remember, obligate is must have. So the example is Bacillus globisporus, which cannot grow above 20 degrees Celsius. So obligate psychrophile is the organism which requires or which must have low temperature for growth and survival. If you put this organism above 20 degrees Celsius, it will die. Okay. Now, another example is a facultative psychrophile. What do you mean by facultative psychrophile? The example is Xanthomonas farmicola. It grows best below 20 degrees Celsius. But even if you put this organism above 20 degrees Celsius, it will not die. It will survive. It can grow above 20 degrees Celsius as well. Okay. So the low temperature requirement is not a must have for Xanthomonas farmicola, but it grows at its best below 20 degrees Celsius. That is why it is termed as psychrophile. But it is facultative psychrophile, which means the cold temperature conditions are not must have. It can also survive about 20 degrees Celsius as well. Okay. So that was all about psychrophiles, the cold loving or the organisms which grow best at low temperature or very low temperature. Now, next ones are mesophiles. So mesophiles are the organisms for which the optimum temperature range is 25 to 40 degrees Celsius. So as it is obvious, our body temperature comes within this range, and that is why most of the human pathogens are mesophilic or are mesophiles, because they grow best near the human body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. Okay. Now, this thermodynamic organisms, another term, thermodynamic organism, they ordinarily live as mesophiles, but they can withstand short periods of exposure to high temperatures. So, if you expose them or if you try to heat the culture of the organism, which is thermodynamic, at high temperature for a short period of time, the organisms will not die or the culture will not get decontaminated. Organism will come back to survival, or once the temperature comes back to normal, the organism will start living again. So mesophiles are the organisms for which the optimum growth temperature is between 25 to 40 degrees Celsius, and most of the human pathogens fall in this category of mesophiles. Now, next example is of thermophiles. So thermophiles are heat-loving organisms, or for which the optimum growth temperature is very high, around 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. Okay. So just like psychrophiles, even thermophiles are classified as obligate thermophiles or facultative thermophiles. So obligate thermophiles are the organisms which survive only at high temperature. So there are organisms which are found to be growing at their best at temperatures of 105 to 115 degrees Celsius, such a high temperature. So obligate thermophiles are organisms which can only survive at very high temperature, but facultative thermophiles are the organisms which grow best at high temperature. But even if you put that organism at normal room temperature, 37 or 40 degrees Celsius, it will still be able to survive. Whereas obligate thermophile will die if you put that organism at normal room temperature or around 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. Why this happens? Because in these obligate animals, obligate organisms, they have only one set of enzymes. Now, in case of obligate thermophiles, they just have a set of enzymes which is capable of working at very, very high temperature. So at room temperature or at low temperature, those enzymes will get denatured, and that is why organism will stop all the functioning and it will die. So facultative organisms are a different kind of organisms, or for which the genetic system, the biochemical system is much more complex. They have dual sets of enzymes. They have two or more sets of enzymes. So in case of facultative thermophile, they have one set of enzyme which is capable of working at its best at a very high temperature, but it also has this another set of enzyme which works best at low temperature or room temperature. So for facultative organisms, the genetic makeup or biochemical complexity is much complex, or complexity is much higher as compared to other normal or obligate organisms. So this is the example of thermophile in cases of hot spring at Nevada. So thermophilic sulfur bacteria can live and grow in the runoff waters from such geysers, um, despite the near boiling temperatures of these regions. Okay, so it has been also observed that bird flu viruses can survive decades in frozen lake ice. Okay, and the increasing temperature of the environment or global warming may release such organisms in the environment, and then it will lead to infection of migratory birds, which will spread in entire world. So this is just one tiny aspect of environmental global warming, and there are many such cascading effects which we are not even aware about currently. So in your books, just write down this second, give number 2 and write down temperature. Under temperature, underline temperature. Under that, write down these three terms: psychrophiles, mesophiles, and thermophiles. Give number 2, write down temperature. Under that, write down psychrophiles, mesophiles, thermophiles, one below the other. And in front of each term, mention the temperature range. For psychrophile, temperature range is 15 to 20 degrees Celsius. To 20 degrees Celsius. For mesophiles, temperature range is 25 to 40 degrees Celsius. And for thermophiles, temperature range is 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, or make it 50 to 75 degrees Celsius. Thermophile, 50 to 75 degrees Celsius. Do not copy 60 degrees Celsius. Write down 50 to 75 degrees Celsius. Okay, so after you have written down these three terms of psychrophile, mesophile, and thermophiles with their respective temperature ranges, below that, write down the meaning of these two terms. Obligate, put a dash, must have environmental condition. Obligate, put a dash, must have environmental condition. Below that, facultative, put a dash. Facultative, put a dash. Able to adjust to and tolerate the given environmental condition. Able to adjust to and tolerate the given environmental condition, but can also withstand other conditions. But can also withstand other conditions. So that was all about temperature. Let's move ahead for next. Okay, yeah. Last part for temperature point. So just now we discussed about the temperature ranges in which bacteria can survive or bacteria can grow best. So within these temperature ranges, there are three critical temperatures which are identified as minimum growth temperature or the lowest temperature at which cells can divide. Then comes maximum growth temperature or the highest temperature at which cells can divide. And then there is optimum growth temperature or the temperature at which cells divide most rapidly. Okay. So for example, you have just written down for psychrophiles, the temperature range is between 15 to 20 degrees Celsius. By that, I mean the minimum growth temperature for psychrophile is 15 degrees Celsius. The maximum growth temperature for psychrophile or obligate psychrophile is 20 degrees Celsius, and the optimum will be somewhere around 17 degrees Celsius. Okay. And based on these three terms, you can form a curve for each class of or each category of organisms based on the temperature. So you can see these curves. So each curve represents each category. So the green colored curve is in the low temperature range, representing typical psychrophiles. Blue colored curve in the optimum temperature or in the room temperature range, known as typical mesophile. They've also given the examples of the organism. The typical thermophile, which survive between 45 to 75 degrees Celsius,